Hi everyone, and welcome to this video going over the Unit 1 exam study guide. In this video, we are going to go over some of the problems from your study guide so that hopefully you have a better time studying for your Unit 1 exam. So let's get started. In the first section, we are solving each equation and identifying whether the equation has one, none, or infinitely many solutions. So I'm going to do all of the odd problems, and then I'm going to leave you the even problems to try on your own. Make sure to check your answers with my answer key in Canvas announcements. So I'm going to draw my line at my equal sign for number 1. And in order to get m by itself, I need to get rid of that plus 7. The opposite of adding 7 is subtracting 7. That cancels out. And negative 2 minus 7 is negative 9. And this is one solution. Whenever you get that your variable just equals one value, that is one solution. In number 3, I'm going to draw my line at my equals again. And I notice that I have some like terms. So I'm going to combine negative 7m and positive 7m. And that actually cancels out to just be 0. And I'm left with 0 equals 8, which does not make sense and does not equal. And so this is an example of no solution. When your variable cancels out and the two sides of your equation do not match, that is no solution. In number 5, I draw my line at my equals, and I need to distribute. I need to multiply the 7 to the n and the 8. We are multiplying. So 7 times n is 7n, and 7 times 8 is 56. And I'm trying to get n by itself. I start with what's not attached to the n, so I'm going to subtract 56 to both sides. 91 minus 56 is 35, equal to 7n. And in order to get rid of the 7, since it's being multiplied to n, I'm going to divide by 7 to both sides. And 35 divided by 7 is 5, and so I'm left with n equals 5, and that's one solution. Number 7, I have to distribute again. So 2 times negative 3 is negative 6, and 2 times negative 3x is negative 6x. And notice how I have an x on either side, and so I need to get everything on the side where it belongs. So I'm going to call the left side my x side, and the right side my number side, and I'm going to see what's on the incorrect side. Negative 6 is on the wrong side, so I'm going to add that to each side, and I'm left with negative 6x is equal to positive 2 minus 7x. And the negative 7x is on the incorrect side, so I'm going to add that to the other side. And negative 6x plus 7x is just equal to x, and x is equal to 2. That is one solution. And then number 9, I have 2 double rainbows, 2 distributive properties to do. Because this is just a negative on the outside of the parentheses, treat that like a negative 1. And so I'm multiplying negative 1 to p and negative 3. Negative 1 times p is negative p. And negative 1 times negative 3 will be a positive 3. Make sure you multiply with the negative. I then am going to multiply negative 3 to 1 and to negative 5p. Negative 3 times 1 is negative 3. And negative 3 times negative 5p will be positive 15p. Make sure you distribute with the negative. I then am going to combine like terms. Remember, we can only combine like terms that are on the same side. For example, I can combine the negative p and the 15p to get 14p. And I can combine the 3 and negative 3, which just cancel each other out to get 0. And then on the other side, I have 6p and 8p, and that will be 14p. Notice how both sides of my equation match perfectly. 14p equals 14p. This is an example of infinitely many solutions because it won't matter what value I plug in, both sides of my equation are always going to match. And so this is infinitely many solutions. And that is solving multi-step equations and identifying the number of solutions. Let's move on to try some word problems. Tracy goes to the store and buys a new iPhone for $350 and some new phone cases for $3.50 each. Remember, each is one of our special words that tells us where the variable is going to go. Define a variable, then write and solve an equation to determine how many phone cases Tracy bought if she spent $392. So my variable is representing what I'm trying to find, what I'm missing. Since I'm trying to figure out how many phone cases Tracy bought, I'm going to say that P equals the number of phone cases Tracy bought. Your variable is a placeholder for what is missing. So if they're asking you to find how many phone cases Tracy bought, that's what we're missing and that's what our variable needs to represent. Now I'm going to make my equation. She bought an iPhone for $350 and some amount of phone cases for $3.50 each. That each tells me that my variable is going to go next to that value because for how many phone cases she bought, she spent $3.50 for each of them. And her total was $392. And so that is my equation. And now I'm going to solve for P. So I'm going to subtract the 350 to either side. And I'm left with 350P is equal to 42. And then since the 350 is being multiplied to P, I'm going to divide by 350 to both sides. And I'm left with P is equal to 12. Notice how it says answer with interpretation. I want to know what the 12 means. Well, let's go back to what we said our variable was. We said that P is representing the number of phone cases Tracy bought. And so if we get that P equals 12, this means that Tracy bought 12 phone cases. So after you get your answer, make sure you know how to interpret your answer within the context of the problem. Let's try another word problem. Imagine figure 1 of a sequence has 20 blocks, figure 2 has 27 blocks, and figure 3 has 34 blocks. Create a table to display each figure number and its corresponding number of blocks. Start your table with figure 0. So I'm going to say figure number is going to be on the left and number of blocks on the right. We want to start at figure 0. We know that figure 1 has 20 blocks, figure 2 has 27 blocks, figure 3 had 34 blocks. And so I want to identify the common difference. Well, it looks like each time I am adding 7 blocks. So in order to figure out how many I had at figure 0, I need to subtract 7 from 20. And so that tells me that figure 0 had 13 blocks. In B, it says write an expression to represent how many blocks will be in figure N. So I start with my starting amount. At figure 0, I had 13 blocks, and each time I'm adding 7. So plus 7n, and this will help me figure out how many blocks are in any figure number. So in C, when it says how many blocks will be in figure 30, they want n to be 30. So I'm going to plug in 30 into my expression and solve. 7 times 30 is 210, and 13 plus 210 tells me that figure 30 will have 223 blocks. So the important part of this problem is make sure that you start with figure 0. Make sure you start with figure 0. Let's move on to talk about inequalities. It says draw a graph for each inequality. Remember, if there is no line under your sign, we use an open circle. And if there is a line under your sign, we use a closed circle. So in 13, I'm going to have an open circle at -5, since there is no line underneath my inequality sign. And my arrow is going towards the left. So I need to make sure that my arrow is going towards the left. In 14, notice how my x is on the wrong side. I want x to be on the left and 3 to be on the right in order for my arrow trick to work. When you rewrite it, make sure that your sign is still facing the same value. So notice how it was opening up towards the 3. That means it still needs to be opening up towards the 3 when I switch it around. So this tells me I'm going to have a closed circle at 3, and I'm going to the left. In 15 and 16, we have to write the inequality ourselves. So always start with x. I have a closed circle at 1, so that tells me I'm going to have a line underneath my sign. And I'm going toward the left, and so I'm going to make my inequality match my arrow. Same thing for 16. I'm going to start with x. I have a closed circle, so there's going to be a line underneath my sign. And I'm at the value -1, and my inequality sign is going to match my arrow. And so that is how we graph and write inequalities from a graph. Make sure in order to do the arrow trick that x is on the left side. Now let's talk about solving inequalities. Once again, I'm going to do 17 and 19, and you are going to do 18 and 20 on your own. So looking at 17, if I draw my line at my inequality sign, I'm going to start by rewriting it down below. I'm going to combine my like terms. So combining -4b and -4b, I get -8b. And since the -8 is being multiplied to the b, I'm going to divide by -8. And 24 divided by -8 is -3. And please pay attention, since I divided both sides by a negative, I have to flip my sign. So my sign is now going to face towards the right. And to graph this, I'm going to have a closed circle at -3, since there's a line underneath my inequality sign, and my line is now going towards the left. Looking at 19, I'm once again going to rewrite my inequality down below so that I have room to solve it. And I need to start with my double rainbow with distributing. Make sure that you include the negative when you distribute. -2 times 7 is -14, and -2 times 8n will be -16n. And I'm going to combine my like terms. 3 minus 14 will be -11. In order to get n by itself, I'm going to add 11 to both sides. And I'm going to continue this over here. I am left with 112 is greater than or equal to -16n. And to get n by itself, I'm going to divide by -16. Once again, since I'm dividing by a negative, I have to flip my sign. So my sign is going to face towards the n, and 112 divided by -16 will be -7. Now to graph this though, I want n to be on the left side. So if I flip this around, make sure your sign is still facing towards the n. And this tells me I'm going to have a closed circle at -7 going towards the right. So when solving inequalities, please make sure that if you ever multiply or divide both sides by a negative, that you flip the sign. Now let's try solving a compound inequality. Looking at 21, I have a disjunction because I see the word or. So I'm expecting my graph to go away from one another. So this tells me that when I graph it, I need to make sure that my graph is going away from one another. And notice how I have two inequalities already split up for me. I have a plus 5 is less than negative 3, and negative 7a is less than negative 63. And I'm going to solve both of these. To get a by itself here, I'm going to subtract 5. And so this tells me that a is going to be less than negative 8. Or, to solve the other side, I need to divide by negative 7 to both sides. And because I divided by a negative, I have to flip my sign. And negative 63 divided by negative 7 is a positive 9. So I'm going to have an open circle at negative 8 going toward the left. And an open circle at 9, which is approximately here, going towards the right. And that matches the disjunction that I saw from the very beginning. Make sure that you write the word or in between your two final inequalities. Next, let's do 23. 23 is a conjunction. I can tell because it's all written as one inequality. And so I need to split this up. I'm going to start with the left side. So I'm going to have negative 25 is less than 5 minus 6k. And let's solve this one first. So in order to get k by itself, I need to subtract 5, which will get me negative 30. And then since the negative 6 is being multiplied to k, I need to divide to get rid of it. And since I'm dividing by a negative, that is going to flip my sign. And negative 30 divided by negative 6 will be a positive 5. And then I need to solve my other side. So notice how I use the middle again. So I'm going to have 5 minus 6k is less than or equal to negative 13. That 5 minus 6k is in both of my inequalities. I'm going to subtract 5 to both sides, and I get negative 6k is less than or equal to negative 18. And then to get rid of the negative 6, I need to divide by negative 6. And since I'm dividing by a negative, I have to flip my sign. Negative 18 divided by negative 6 will be a positive 3. So when you are writing this all as one, make sure that your answer goes from least to greatest. From least to greatest. So I'm going to have 3 on the left, since that's the smallest value. K is in the middle, and 5 is the biggest, so it's on the right side. And make sure that you keep the same signs. So K is greater than or equal to 3, so it's facing the K with the line underneath it. And K is less than 5, so it's facing the 5 with no line underneath it. So I'm going to have a closed circle at 3 and an open circle at 5. And because this is a conjunction, they meet in the middle. And so that is how we solve compound inequalities. If it says the word or, we solve both of those inequalities and our graph is going to go away from one another. But if it's all written as one or says the word and, that's a conjunction, and we can expect the graph to go towards one another. If it's all written as one, make sure that you split it up into its two problems. Next, let's solve some absolute value equations. When we solve absolute value equations, we need to get the absolute value all by itself and then break it up into two possible problems, considering that in absolute value, I can have two values with the same distance away from 0. So in 25, my absolute value is all by itself, which is the first step. And now I need to split this up into two problems. 6x could equal positive 30, or 6x could equal negative 30. Notice how the inside stayed exactly the same. And now I'm going to solve. To get rid of the 6, I need to divide by 6. And I get that x is equal to 5. And for the other side, I'm going to divide by 6 as well. And negative 30 divided by 6 is negative 5. And so those are my two solutions to this absolute value equation. Now let's talk about 27. In 27, my absolute value is not by itself. I need to get rid of the -4. Since it's being multiplied to the absolute value, I need to divide by -4 to both sides. And I'm left with the absolute value of n minus 6 is equal to positive 10. And now that my absolute value is by itself, this is where I break it up. N minus 6 is equal to positive 10, and n minus 6 is equal to negative 10. Please do not split up your absolute value until it is all by itself. You need the absolute value all by itself before you break it up into its two problems. And now I solve. To get rid of the minus 6, I'm going to add 6 to both sides. So I get that n is equal to 16. And then I'm going to add 6 on the other side as well. And negative 10 plus 6 will be negative 4. Please make sure that you use your calculator if you're still struggling with your positive and negative integers. Last one, let's do number 29. Once again, my absolute value is not by itself. So what I need to do is I need to subtract 6 to both sides. And I'm left with the absolute value of negative 7n is equal to 49. And now that the absolute value is by itself, I break it up into its two problems. Negative 7n equals positive 49, and negative 7n equals negative 49. I divide by negative 7 to both sides, and I get n is equal to negative 7. And I divide by negative 7 over here, and I get that n is equal to positive 7, since the negatives will cancel out. And that is how we solve absolute value equations. Make sure you get the absolute value all by itself, and then break it up into its positive and negative solutions. Now let's try a word problem talking about inequalities. Willow Glen is hosting homecoming in the gym, which can hold no more than 200 people. There are 16 ASB members that need to attend the event, and every single Willow Glen student is bringing a guest from another school. Let X represent the number of Willow Glen High School students who are attending homecoming. Write and solve an inequality to represent how many students can attend the event. So I know that 16 ASB members are coming, and for every Willow Glen High School student, they are bringing a guest. That means that we are doubling the number of Willow Glen High School students that are coming. For example, if 2 students are coming and they're both bringing a guest, that will be a total of 4. If 3 are coming and they're all bringing a guest, that would be a total of 6. So 2x represents every student bringing a guest. And the gym can hold no more than 200 people. This means that 200 is a maximum. So I'm going to have 200 as my total, and I need my sign to face 200 because the amount that I have has to be less than 200. But it does say no more than, which means we can have exactly 200, just not more than 200. So I'm going to put a line underneath my sign to indicate that 200 students is okay. And now I'm going to solve. So I'm going to start by subtracting 16 to both sides. And I get that 2x is less than or equal to 184. And then to get rid of the multiplying by 2, I'm going to divide by 2 to both sides. And I get that x is less than or equal to 92. This means that there can be 92 students or less to attend homecoming. So 90 students can attend, 10 students can attend, but 93 students cannot attend. 92 or less. And lastly, let's go over how to solve literal equations. Literal equations are the equations that have multiple variables as part of the equation, and we can solve for the indicated variable. So looking at 32, if I wanted to solve for x, I need to get x all by itself, so I need to get rid of the k. Since the x and the k are right next to each other, that means they're being multiplied, and to get rid of multiplication, I divide. So I'm going to divide both sides by k, but if you notice on the other side, I'm already dividing w and v, so if I'm already dividing, I can just add k to my division, add it to the denominator. And so this tells me that x will equal w over kv. And there I've gotten x by itself, and so I have solved for x. Looking at 34, if I want to solve for x, I need to get rid of the y and the c. I'm going to get rid of the c first since it's furthest from x. Notice how x and y are right next to each other, and c is a little further. So I'm going to get rid of c first. Since c is being divided, to get rid of division, I multiply. So I'm going to multiply by c to both sides. And so I'm left with gc is equal to xy. X is not by itself yet. I have to get rid of y. Since x and y are being multiplied together, I have to divide to get rid of it. And this tells me that x will equal gc divided by y. So solving literal equations, ask yourself what you need to get rid of to get your variable by itself, and do the opposite of what is happening. We don't have to combine any like terms, we just have to leave it as we wrote it. So g times c divided by y. And so that is the majority of your Unit 1 exam study guide. I hope that this helped you get a good start on your study guide. Please let me know if you have any more questions, and happy studying!